The Regent's Reign, Chapter 11, The Wedding. 2 more months passed before Lancelot and Gwen's wedding finally came. It had been almost half a year since Morgana's short reign over Camelot. They'd finally gotten the old council chambers cleaned out and rebuilt. The unfortunate news from that end was that while the cup was recovered, undamaged somehow, and was now safely where no one would think to look for it, under Merlin's bed with a look-alike forged and placed in the vault, there was no sign of Morgause or Morgana. There was some blood from where the cup had been spilled that would not be scrubbed up no matter who tried, and some that came up with ease from where Morgana and Morgause had last been seen. But otherwise, there was no sign of them at all. The morning of the wedding dawned gray, though the clouds seemed to flee the sky as the servants rose for the day. Merlin was helping Gwen that morning, and smiled as she made her way into the rooms that Arthur had gifted the couple. Gwen was already up and pacing. "Everything will be perfect today," Merlin assured. "It looked like rain this morning," Gwen fretted. "As if I'd let that happen today, Gwen," Merlin said with a grin after double-checking that they were alone. "You can change the weather?" Gwen asked, a little flabbergasted. Merlin paused as she realized that she'd never really brought up to anyone who knew just how powerful she was. Sure, they knew she'd been born with her powers, which was an indicator of how strong she was, but considering they didn't have any sort of measure for someone with magic, it might be a bit of a shock. "Don't worry about it. Not today." "The dresses are here?" she asked, stepping over to the 2 wrapped packages that sat on the table. "Yes, but..." Gwen began, but Merlin had already opened the first package. She blinked. "I thought you were wearing pink," Merlin said, staring down at the fabric in front of her. It was not pink. In point of fact, this was a color Merlin had not often seen. Purple was rare, especially when it came to dyeing fabric. Purple dyes were wildly expensive, and generally the color was reserved only for royalty because of that alone. Gwen stepped up behind her. "Merlin, I am wearing pink. That's your dress," Gwen said gently. "I can't wear this. It's purple," Merlin said, running a finger over the fabric. It was nice. Nicer than she'd ever owned. She was reasonably certain this was actually silk. The dress itself was lilac. The corset was a deeper purple, more of a lavender than the rest of it. "This is wildly expensive," Merlin said. "He's a prince. He can afford it, Merlin," Gwen said. Then she frowned as she actually looked at Merlin's face. "Why are you afraid of this?" "Because it's all going to go away. The minute he finds out the truth, he'll never even want to look at me again," Merlin blurted, turning away from the dress. "Merlin, you can't tell me I'm wrong. Maybe if Morgana hadn't betrayed him, if magic wasn't what had ripped her to pieces inside." "I don't think magic did that. I think it was fear. Fear that Uther drilled into her and everyone in Camelot." Gwen took Merlin's hands and made her face her. "For all the faith you have in Arthur, for everything else, you have so little faith in him when it comes to you. Why? Why can you not let yourself be happy?" "Too many people know as it is. I know you'd never, none of you, but it's dangerous. I've never had so many people know, and I will not have any of you. Not for me," she said, shaking slightly. She shook her head and plastered on a smile. "No choice but to wear the purple now, though. Arthur would have me in the stocks." "He would not. He loves you too much. He would love you regardless. You need to tell him. No one else will. You are our family now, Merlin. I think fear is more dangerous than magic could ever be, Gwen said, pulling Merlin into a hug. Now, I think I have a wedding to prepare for. Are you feeling up to helping me? Always, Merlin grinned, scrubbing at her face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It's just a lot. It's all right, Merlin. You're practically my sister. Family means being there for you through everything. Now, if we don't get dressed, we're going to be late, Gwen teased. Merlin nodded, helping her out of the clothes she'd slept in and into the new dress. The color of the dress Merlin wore, which Arthur had managed to keep a secret from everyone but Gwen and the seamstress, caused something of a stir. But Arthur's new tunic was the same purple, leaving no one questioning why Merlin was wearing that color. The hand fasting went well. Arthur got through the whole thing without forgetting a word of the carefully prepared speech, the one Merlin had helped him write. The feast after was fun, and for once Merlin got to actually attend instead of serve at it. It was held in one of the smaller banquet halls, mostly full of just friends, a mix of servants and knights. Arthur smiled as he stepped up to Merlin. Gwen and Lancelot sat at the high table. At the moment, they were exchanging gifts. Arthur raised an eyebrow as each opened a small box holding a simple necklace that looked to hold half a coin on the end. Why coins? He asked, and Merlin looked up at him, going pink. Well, not everyone is rich enough to afford rings, Arthur. They tend to be passed down in families if they have them at all. Coins are a little more common, but rare enough to still be special. It's pretty common when someone is married to split a coin in two. Each keeps half. Merlin's blush had grown darker. Arthur lifted an eyebrow. Something my mother said when you came to Ealdor with me. What did she say? He asked gently. She said we seemed as if we were two halves of the same coin, Merlin muttered. Arthur chuckled. Your mother was a wise woman, he said, kissing the back of her hand. Sorry, princess. Can't have you hugging this vision all to yourself tonight, Gwen said, winking as he stepped up to Merlin, taking her other hand. Would you care for a dance? He asked Merlin with a little teasing bow. You know what, Sir Gawain? That sounds like fun, Merlin said, shooting Arthur a teasing grin. Arthur let her go with a slight laugh. His uncle stepped up to him with a goblet of wine in each hand. He held one out to Arthur and raised an eyebrow. Should you not be dancing with your intended, sire? Agravain asked, and Arthur took the goblet his uncle offered. We will. Sir Gawain is practically her brother. It's a wedding. Let them have fun. We all deserve a little bit of that these days, Arthur said, taking a sip of the wine. It was a good vintage. Agravain nodded. Of course, sire. In the end, Arthur did dance with Merlin more than anyone else did. Galahad got a dance in. He was a bit less trained in dance than he was in combat. Elliot and Percival both danced with her as well. Leon was against dancing. He claimed it was on principle, but Arthur knew it was because he had 2 left feet and was tone deaf to any kind of music, though he did enjoy it well enough. Lancelot and Gwen danced only with each other, and Lancelot carried her over the doorway to their now shared chambers. The doors closed behind them, and Merlin leaned on Arthur. They look so happy, she said, grinning at him. They do. I don't expect to see them for a few days. He grinned and held out his arm to Merlin. May I walk you home? He asked, and Merlin took his arm. I think Raz will be proud when she hears you only stepped on my toes once this time, she teased. Arthur laughed. They paused on the doorstep of the physician's quarters. You can tell her that yourself tomorrow, he teased. You stepped on mine twice. That is slanderous, you brat. I did not, she said, her smile dimmed slightly. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing. Just thinking," she said, her smile brightening again. He nodded and stepped down the hall. "Arthur?" she called after him. He paused, turning to admire her. Purple was a good color on her. He'd known it would be, but blue was better, he mused. "Yes?" he asked as silence stretched on. "I love you," she said, her smile turning more genuine. He beamed back to her, practically skipping back up the steps and pulling her into a kiss. "I love you too," he said, laying his forehead to hers. She smiled up at him. He could tell there was something more, but there was time. They had time for that.